after that? And when your airline delivers 0-star service, what are your rights? Don't forget, you can check us out live, Sky Channel 83.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ngā mihi o te rā. Good afternoon, I'm Sarah Bradley. An Auckland food bank says it's seen a huge increase in demand following the biggest annual food price increase in 13 years. Data from Stats NZ shows food prices were 8.3% higher this month compared to the same period last year. Sophie Gray from the Good Works Trust says this year is the busiest they've been.
Just absolutely mind-blowing. People who've never ever had to consider what they spend at the supermarket or whether or not they've got enough are now having to really weigh up what they spend, and people who previously could always just scrape by currently aren't scraping by.
Fruit and vegetable prices increased by 15% this month compared to the same period last year. The country's biggest supermarket chain, Foodstuffs, says it's taking the edge off food inflation for consumers. Managing Director Chris Quinn says the New World, Pack and Save and Four Square chains have raised prices for some goods by 6.1%, even though their suppliers' prices are up by more than 8%. He says some prices are frozen at last year's levels and other prices and costs are being contained.
Effectively, that means very low, no or negative margin on some of those products, but they are the products that matter most to the weekly shop for households.
Chris Quinn says Foodstuffs is responsible for only 19 cents in every retail dollar, with supplier costs and GST accounting for the rest. Political leaders have paid tribute to the late Queen Elizabeth and the relationship she had with Aotearoa. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has told Parliament the Queen stood beside New Zealand through some of its darkest days,
including the March 15 mosque attacks and the Christchurch earthquake. Mr Speaker, Her Majesty's consistency did not come at the cost of New Zealand evolving as a nation. She stood in support of our aims and ambitions as an independent country within the Commonwealth. What mattered to her was that all New Zealanders reach their potential.
The House is now adjourned until next Tuesday. Queen Elizabeth is currently lying at rest in the 12th century St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh. Her body will be moved to London overnight. Kawerau mill owner Essity hopes to resume production on Thursday after reaching a deal with the Pulp and Paper Workers Union. 145 workers at the mill have been locked out without pay since August the 9th. After several days of negotiations, the Employment Relations Authority has recommended pay increases for workers, which Essity has accepted. The Swedish-owned company has withdrawn all legal claims against the union. Principals say removing mask requirements is a massive relief for schools. As of today, masks are only required in health and aged care settings, and household contacts don't have to isolate with cases if they return daily negative RAT test results. Te Tai Tokoro Principals Association President Patrick Newman says he's glad to return to some normality.
I think I, along with just about every other principal and teacher in Te Tai Tokoro, will welcome that we can start to get back to normalcy for both our children, our whānau and our teachers and our profession.
Patrick Newman says students now have no excuse not to attend school. Succession, the story of a dysfunctional wealthy family jockeying for power, and feel-good comedy Ted Lasso took the top honours at the Emmy Awards in Hollywood today. Succession was named Best Drama Series. Ted Lasso won Best Comedy Series for the second straight year, and its stars Jason Sudeikis and Brett Goldstein were second-time winners of Best Comedy Actor and Supporting Actor. Lee Jung-jae was named Best Actor in a Drama for his role in the South Korean drama Squid Game. To sport, Seven Stars Portia Woodman, Sarah Hirini and Stacey Flula have been named in a 32-strong Black Ferns squad for next month's Rugby World Cup in Aotearoa. Kennedy Simon and Ruahei de Mont will co-captain the side. Sports editor Stephen Hewson reports.
The veteran halfback Kendra Coxedge and outside back Renee Whitcliffe will be playing in their fourth World Cup, while 7 players are returning for their second after being part of the 2017 winning side. Among the notable omissions, though, are Chiefs' first 5 Chelsea Semple, Sevens player Tyler Nathan Wong and Canterbury winger Grace Steinmetz. Black Ferns Director of Rugby Wayne Smith says it's tough for players who have missed out, as a number had had long and distinguished careers with the side. The Black Ferns opening World Cup matches against Australia at Auckland's Eden Park on October the 8th.
Meanwhile, a rejigged All Blacks loose forward trio will take on the Wallabies in the opening Bledisloe Cup test in Melbourne on Thursday night. With Ardie Savea and Shannon Frizzell unavailable due to paternity leave and injury respectively, coach Ian Foster has named Hoskins Sotutu to start at number 8 and Scott Barrett at blindside flanker. It will be Sotutu's first All Blacks appearance of the year. Barrett's move to the side of the scrum sees veteran lock Brodie Retallick return to the starting 15. The backline remains unchanged after the side's win over Argentina in Hamilton. And New Zealand's most successful Olympian canoeist Lisa Carrington has been invested as a Dame Companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit at Government House in Wellington. That's the news.
Hello to a public holiday.
She's a great woman. She's an amazing queen. All her life serving the people.
I'm happy to have a public holiday, but I don't really care about the reason behind it.
Goodbye to COVID traffic lights.
I'm quite happy not to have to wear a mask at work, but I do worry about everybody else in our community that sees it as a way of protecting themselves.
And the tide is turning in Ukraine's favour.
The Kremlin anticipated taking Ukraine in a matter of days. 201 of them later, it's going backwards.
The past, present and future. Morning Report weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Lisa Owen and Checkpoint next, but first the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waikato, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. A few showers, some may be heavy today, with a possible thunderstorm about Waikato, clearing north of Auckland tomorrow evening. Waitomo to Wellington, including Taihape, showers clearing for most tomorrow, but lingering about Taihape with snow above 900 metres. Gisborne to Wairarapa, mainly fine, a few showers south of Wairoa, becoming frequent tomorrow morning and spreading north in the afternoon. Bulla, Nelson and Marlborough showers, some heavy with thunderstorms in Bulla, easing tomorrow morning, snow above 400 metres. For Westland, Fiordland and Canterbury to Southland, showers, some heavy with possible thunderstorms and hail today, and snow above 400 metres in the north and 200 metres in the south. Showers clearing most places overnight, but lingering about the south and east coasts. And for the Chatham Islands, a few showers turning to rain for a time tomorrow morning. This is RNZ National. It's 7 minutes past 5. I'll be back with the headlines around 20 past.
Nā mihi Sarah, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Another record no one wants to celebrate. Food prices have risen at their fastest annual rate in 13 years. Data from Stats New Zealand shows food prices were 8.3% higher this month compared to the same period last month. And Countdown says they've received 4 times the number of cost increase requests from suppliers last month compared to a year ago. We'll speak to them in a moment, but first, here's Louise Tanuth.
We all know our wallets have been battered by a trip to the supermarket. Today, it's official. The largest annual increase in food prices since July 2009. With grocery food prices up 8.7%, these shoppers are feeling the pinch at the checkout.
Oh yeah, the broccoli was about, I think it's $6 for a tiny little bunch. It's huge, unbelievable actually. Yeah, I just worry for other families with little kids.
A big jump, more each week or fortnight. Canned food, bread, meat is the biggie, but yes, we've really noticed it.
Sophie Gray runs the Good Works Trust Food Bank on Auckland's North Shore. In the last year, demand has skyrocketed.
Just absolutely mind-blowing. People who've never ever had to consider what they spend at the supermarket or whether or not they've got enough are now having to really weigh up what they spend, and people who previously could always just scrape by currently aren't scraping by.
Fruit and vegetable prices have jumped 15%, and Jerry Prendergast from United Fresh says extreme weather conditions have pushed prices up because thousands of crops were destroyed. And inflation is having a huge impact on the cost to harvest crops.
The pressure that growers are under with increased fertiliser costs, increased labour costs, increased fuel costs, compliance cost increases and so on.
But he says things are looking up for shoppers in the next few months.
If the weather gods look after us, we could be seeing some quite good increases of supply of vegetables, and we can expect to see a continuation of good value fruit and vegetables as we head into late spring and into the summer months.
Even more reason to look forward to sunny days ahead.
Downs Commercial Director Steve Mills joins me now. Kia ora, Steve.
Kia ora. Lisa, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. 4 times the number of cost increase requests. Where are they coming from? What kinds of products?
Well, they're coming across the board, actually, across meat, produce, grocery, both local and imported products.
But some are higher than that food index figure of 8.3% increase, right? You're experiencing higher jumps in prices in some particular areas. Which ones and why?
Yeah, so they're ranging from 1% to up to 72%, and maybe a couple of examples like Domio pasta sauce, which most of us would know, 57% increase. Nutella spread is another one that a lot of households would know, 32% increase. And really is coming about by increased labour, freight, particularly fuel, raw materials and packaging, and all that's flowing through to make up about 2/3 the cost of the products that we're selling.
So what's the 72% hike?
I can't give that details on that, but...
Can you tell me sort of generally what food group? Just tell me what food group. You don't need to tell me the brand.
And grocery.
Right, okay. So when a supplier makes a request for a price increase, how does it work? Do you negotiate or does it just happen?
No, absolutely. We sit down with our suppliers. We'll have a conversation about what we can do collectively together to minimise that cost increase. So whatever we can do in our business to support them to reduce costs, whether that's through our logistics part of our business, but also...
Give me an example, Steve. How could you help them reduce costs practically?
Well, definitely through logistics, and so we can help them reduce costs by bringing products into our DC and using our network to get products to the store versus going direct to store. Also, through raw materials, we can do whatever we can to help them with raw materials.
You touched on it a little bit, but New Zealand is a big food exporter, right? And lots of times people think we grow so much, how come it costs so much? But you're competing with international prices, aren't you, to keep the goods here?
Yeah, particularly in beef and lamb. If you look at the increase in labour, fertiliser costs, and the export demand is a lot higher than it's ever been before. And there's big demand overseas for our products.
How much of the grocery shop, could you give me a percentage, in our trolleys when we get to the counter is imported? Because obviously offshore inflation in some places is going higher than our own inflation.
I think about 30% of the products that we're selling is imported, but some of it's also made up. We've got companies here that will bring product in, but we've classed them as, local companies, but in general about 30%.
And what are you seeing in terms of those imported products?
Significant increases, so in some cases more than double the inflation price in New Zealand.
Do you try and substitute them for other things or find another supplier?
Absolutely, and our focus is to support local wherever we can, and maybe a good example of that is, we've got barn eggs at $4 this week, we've got washed potatoes for a 4 kilo bag at $6, and a block of cheese under $10, so we're doing everything we can with local suppliers to minimise those cost increases the customers are experiencing.
Hey Steve, have you been on the shop floor at the supermarket, any of the supermarkets today?
Yes, I was in White Shores actually.
Okay. Hey, I'm just really curious about masks. Are people still wearing them?
No. But it's voluntary. So where people want to wear them, we're sort of more than welcome to let them wear them, or they want to wear them, they can wear them in the store or outside the store. But I didn't see many people wearing a mask in White Shores today.
Appreciate your time this evening. That's Steve Mills, who's Countdown's commercial director there. 14 minutes after 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Now, let us know what you think about that. What have you noticed in terms of increased food prices, and what does it mean for you? Are you growing your own veg, cutting anything out of your lifestyle to fund your food bill, making different kinds of meals? Text us on 2101, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. To the UK now, and Queen Elizabeth's children, led by the new King Charles III, have stood vigil around her coffin at St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh. Thousands of mourners are now filing past her casket, which is draped in the Scottish Royal Standard. The BBC's Alan Little has this report on the day's events.
A bearer party of the Royal Regiment of Scotland brought the Queen's coffin from Holyrood House back into public view. For today, the eyes of the world intrude on private sorrow, as the Queen's family subordinate their own grief to the imperatives of public ritual. Queen Elizabeth's 4 children walked behind their mother's hearse. Briefly, an insult was shouted at the Duke of York. It brought this reaction from an otherwise subdued crowd. The Royal Mile of Edinburgh is an ancient thoroughfare, steep in its progress towards St Giles Cathedral, the historic High Kirk of Edinburgh, where the Queen had sometimes worshipped, not as head of the church here, but simply as a member. Here they placed on the coffin the crown of Scotland, made in the 16th century for the Queen's ancestor, James V. It is the centrepiece of the Scottish crown jewels, also known as the Honours of Scotland. Consider the quiet symbolism of this. It is a gesture toward the distinctive character of Scotland's historic nationhood.
I welcome all of you to St Giles Cathedral. Here, John Knox confronted Mary, Queen of Scots. Here, James VI argued about liturgy. Here, our late Queen received the honours of Scotland.
Gracious is the Lord and righteous. Yea, our God is merciful. The Lord preserveth the simple. I was brought low and he helped me.
The Queen's coffin now rests here for 24 hours. Tomorrow it will be taken to London to lie in state at Westminster Great Hall. The Scottish Parliament his mother opened 23 years ago is the centre of public and political life here now. This evening the King and Queen consort were escorted into the chamber by the King's bodyguard in Scotland, the Royal Company of Archers.
Meanwhile, London is gearing up for a major event with nearly 1 million people expected to queue to pay their respects to the Queen. The Queen's coffin will lie in state in Westminster for 4 days before the funeral on Monday. All across the city, preparations are underway for a very big occasion. Corin Dan and our cameraman Nick Monroe are in London.
Queen Elizabeth II's image has long been a favourite subject of artists. And today, the graffiti artist, who goes by the name of Humour, is putting his spin on the Queen's image on a wall in old railway arches under Waterloo Station.
Doing a tribute to the late Queen as a bit of a sort of memorial to her. And what I've done is I've kind of found 5 different images of her. She was quite well known for her very vibrant and colourful attire. So I've kind of photoshopped 3 different hats, 2 different jackets. Yeah, trying to pay my respects to her, but at the same time making it quite colourful and quite fun.
Whether Humour's tribute to the Queen lasts long, though, remains to be seen.
Yeah, so it's really hard to say. Tribute pieces normally get a little bit more life. Other artists tend to respect them a bit more, but, you know, it might come down tomorrow and might be painted over already, so you really can't say.
Over at Buckingham Palace, the tributes are perhaps more traditional, but no less committed.
It's a visual picture of Her Majesty the Queen with her late, that's her late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. It's a beautiful original photograph of them.
Self-confessed royal superfan John Laurie's giving up his home comforts and camping outside the palace for 10 days.
We've been here since Thursday. This is our 4th night sleeping here, and we're doing 10 days of mourning. Her Majesty the Queen did her duty first. That came first. Then her family, and she was like a mother to us all.
For John, marking big royal events has been a lifelong passion, and not having the Queen around is tough to bear.
We miss her so much. We really do miss her. We miss her presence, and we miss her, especially at Christmas when she does her Christmas speech. And she was loved throughout the whole world, everywhere. New Zealand, everywhere. She was loved. She's been through the whole world. That's why I call her the mother of the world, and of course the nation.
It's not just Londoners going above and beyond. Lemmy travelled from France to pay his respects.
For me, I have goosebumps now because it represents something. I really want to be there to communicate with the British people and the Commonwealth people, you know.
People wouldn't necessarily think that French would want to do that, but there must be quite a few.
To be honest, we are the best enemies, but we are also the best allies. And I know that French and English finally love each other, but they don't want to say it.
His genuine love for the English royals clear to see, as he proudly showed us his newly purchased collector's edition magazine marking the Queen's life.
It's like a special edition from Hello, and I love it because there is some pictures. They are very not classical. I know a lot of pictures of her, and some of them are very rare.
You're so right, they're kind of old school tabloid, aren't they?
Yeah, it's crazy. For me, it's like a piece of collection. You know, you have all her life, and she live long, as you know, and she's amazing.
71-year-old Kiwi Neil Harrison, who says he should be retired, is overseeing health and safety at the Mall.
Common sense, at the end of the day. I've been doing this for 40-odd years now. I've been living over here 50 years. I've got 7 grandkids here now, which is while I'm still working at 71. I'll be 72 next Monday, when the day of the funeral.
Originally from Levin, Neil's been living in London for decades, and he has no doubt it will cope with the 1 million visitors expected this week. Can the city cope with this?
Yeah, of course, yeah. They always bounce back, very resilient, yeah, no problem.
Meanwhile, down at the souvenir shops in Piccadilly Circus, new memorabilia marking the Queen's reign is not yet on sale. At Shahal's store, the new orders of teaspoons and mugs still haven't arrived yet from China.
People are demanding, like, you should bring the mug, you should bring the magnet, t-shirt, flag, and we haven't got any idea about this. So people are giving ideas, so you should bring t-shirt, like a bag or flags.
Whether the memorabilia makes it or not, London will be ready for what is going to be one of the city's biggest events of a generation.
And we'll go live to London to speak to Corin just after the news at 6. And if you want to check out the video with that story filmed by Nick Munro, it'll be on our webpage. Let's get to some of your feedback now. You're getting in touch about food prices. Fleur from Green Bay in Auckland says we're growing our own greens and cutting meat out of our diet. And Angelo's got in touch to say, having spent the past 10 years living in Europe, most of that time in Germany, I am in shock at the cost of living back home. Food in Germany, half the price than here. Electricity, telephone, 2/3 of the price of here. Interesting, isn't it? Do keep your feedback coming, 2101 on text, or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. It is 22 minutes after 5 and you are with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. The text is 2101. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can send us an email. checkpoint@rnz.co.nz is the address. And it's time to go to the headlines with Sarah. Anei Sarah, mina pita kōrero.
Kia ora, Lisa. An Auckland food bank says the increase in demand for its services has been absolutely mind-blowing, following the biggest annual increase for food prices in 13 years. Data from Stats NZ shows food prices were 8.3% higher this month compared to the same period last year. Political leaders have paid tribute to the late Queen Elizabeth and the relationship she had with Aotearoa. The House is now adjourned until next Tuesday. Thousands of people in Edinburgh have lined up to pay their respects to Queen Elizabeth II as she lies in state at St Giles Cathedral. The Queen's body will be flown to London overnight. Principals say removing mask requirements is a massive relief for schools. From today, masks are only required in health and aged care settings. Toilet paper manufacturer Essity hopes to resume production on Thursday after reaching a deal with the Pulp and Paper Workers Union. 145 workers at Essity's Kawaro mill have been locked out without pay since August the 9th. A group of people awarded the Queen's birthday honours today at Government House are some of the last to receive them in the Queen's name. They include Olympian dame Lisa Carrington for her services to canoe racing and filmmaker Chelsea Winstanley for her services to the screen industry and te reo Māori. And a large giant squid has washed ashore at Farewell Spit at the top of the South Island. Tour guide Anton Donaldson says seeing a creature that lives hundreds of metres below the ocean's surface is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I'll have updated news headlines at around 20 to 6.
Kia ora rā e ho. The 32 players who will attempt to defend the Rugby World Cup on New Zealand soil have been confirmed. Less than a month out from their opening match against Australia at Eden Park, Black Ferns coach Wayne Smith named his squad for the tournament in Auckland today. Sports reporter Clay Wilson was at the announcement and he's now in the studio with me. Big day for these 32 women. So what are the main talking points on the squad?
Yeah, well, a big day for those 32, but you have to remember a lot of players missing out on a team as well. And Wayne Smith did mention there this afternoon, they made over 60 phone calls to players, good phone calls or bad phone calls. So it looks like just as many players were in contention that have missed out as well. And this new coaching team have tried to give as many players a chance as possible. They've only just come in at the start of this year and they've just tried to give those players a chance and say, go out and do your thing, we'll give you a game or two. So obviously that's what's happened, and they've had a lot of players in contention for this squad. It is relatively inexperienced, but the Black Ferns, up until recently, haven't played a lot of games in recent years. We obviously had COVID as well, and so that you're looking at the likes of Kendra Cox-Edge, Charmaine McMenamin, Renee Wycliffe, these players that have been around for a while who are going to have to provide that experience. But then you have the injection of the Black Ferns Sevens players. There's 5 of them that have been named in this team: Sarah Hirini, Ruby Tui, Portia Woodman, Stacey Fleur and Teresa Fitzpatrick, and come from a team that's had a lot of success, so they're going to bring that into this Black Ferns 15s team. So outside of that, fit, fast and explosive athletes is what Wayne Smith said. They're trying to play this fast, attacking, up-tempo style, and they're the kind of players he went for in this final 32.
OK, let's talk about the All Blacks too. Now, the team was also named for Thursday night's first Bledisloe Cup test in Australia. As exciting as the other team?
Well,
not to be a downer though, Clay.
Yeah,
you know.
Well, and really there's not a huge amount in terms of changes to talk about. They've only made two player changes and 3 positional changes in the starting 15. So they've tried to keep things pretty consistent. So in that sense, there isn't as much to talk about. I guess the big thing is Hoskin Satutu. He comes in, he hasn't played a test all year. Artie Severe's stayed back here in New Zealand for the birth of his latest child. So Hoskin Satutu's got an opportunity. Brodie Retallick's back into the starting lineup. But otherwise, they're trying to keep things relatively consistent. They had that big win against Argentina, so they've obviously haven't wanted to tinker too much, and they're going to want to wrap it up in this first match, because if they can win this first match on Thursday night, they keep the Bledisloe Cup again, and losing the Bledisloe Cup wouldn't be, I'm sure, not top of their list after everything that's transpired in the last few months. They want to lock it away before they come back home to play at Eden Park next weekend.
I know you're eyeing me because you think I'm going to ask you for a prediction, but I'm not going to be that cruel. But are you feeling positive?
Well, I think we saw signs in the Argentina game, but we saw signs in the South Africa game as well, didn't we? So it's very hard to say, and the whole competition's been all over the shop this year, so I'm not going to put too much on the line.
OK, you be comfortable on the fence there, Clay.
Yes.
Thank you. That is Clay Wilson joining us there with sport. Jetstar's treatment of a family with disabled children that ended in a ruined holiday and significant stress has landed airline policy and manners in the spotlight again. Despite checking in 45 minutes ahead of their flight, the family says they were turned away from Jetstar after waiting in line to drop off their daughter's wheelchair. That counter closed before they got to the front, and they say they were simply told it was too late. They were then given the option, they say, to book another flight at their expense or get someone to collect the wheelchair within 30 minutes. The family ended up driving from Auckland to Wellington instead. So what are your rights when things go bad? Well, joining us now is John Duffy from Consumer New Zealand. Kia ora, John. How many complaints do you get about Jetstar?
Kia ora. Well, yeah, airlines in general make up, after supermarkets, are probably the most frequently complained of industry that we deal with. And over the last wee while, there's been some absolute shockers, and I would count this as one of them.
What are people's biggest complaints?
Typically that that a flight has been cancelled or delayed, that they haven't had a clear explanation of what their rights are. And generally when people are contacting us, they're suspicious. They may have been given a bit of a nebulous story by the airline, and then they're ringing us to find out what their actual rights are. And I guess, for a lot of the time when there's disruptions due to weather or, I don't know, there's a COVID lockdown or something like that happens, it's really important that the airline is on the front foot in explaining to people why the cancellation or the delay has occurred, because that is the key decision point for what your rights are as a consumer.
Right, so if it's their fault, right, John, something that they could have controlled, then you're entitled in essence to compensation, right?
Yes, that's right. So it's within the control of the airline, and that would be something like a mechanical failure on the plane, or even if all the flight crew have not been able to turn up to work because they've got COVID. That's an operational matter that's within the airline's control, even though it is linked to a pandemic, which is out of the airline's control.
But the thing is, it's really difficult as a passenger to know when you're the one who stuffed up or whether it's the airline and they should take responsibility. One thing that I see all the time is engineering or crew difficulties. Well, what does that tell you?
Well, that is an operational matter. That is something that is within the airline's control, and therefore your rights open up at that point. So if the airline can't put you onto a convenient alternative transport option, they need to refund you. And also, if you need to go out, for example, maybe there's not a flight till the next day and you need to go out and book a night's accommodation, you need to get taxis to and from the airport and buy a meal, all of that needs to be covered by the airline if the delay or the cancellation is within the airline's control.
Do you think they're intentionally fudging it to avoid being responsible?
Look, we have seen some pretty atrocious behaviour. So Jetstar in particular has terms and conditions on its website that we've seen where they accept that, yes, they're liable for things like accommodation and transfers and things like that if the fault is within their control, if the delay, is within their control. But they've put arbitrary caps on the amounts that you can spend. Well, the Civil Aviation Act is absolutely silent to the amount that you can spend, other than saying you're not entitled to more than 10 times the original cost of your ticket. So yes, they do fudge at the edges, and that's why we're calling for the government to fast-track regulations to require standard form descriptions of consumer rights to be provided to people whenever an event occurs that could delay or cancel a flight.
If we go back to Jetstar, right, and the case that has prompted this conversation, this family says they got there 45 minutes in advance and were checked in 45 minutes in advance. They're then standing in a queue to drop off the wheelchair, right? By the time they get to the front of the queue, they're told, oh, sorry, we're closed. Whose fault and problem is that?
Well, from the best I can make out from Jetstar's terms and conditions online is they say that check-in and bag drop closes 30 minutes before the flight. So it all comes down to how long they were standing in that queue, I suppose. I mean, at a practical level, yes, you absolutely accept that if a plane's going to leave on time, your bags need to be checked in a little bit earlier so that they can get those bags into the hold and lock the plane up so it can take off and not delay the departure time. So 30 minutes, in my mind, seems relatively reasonable. However, in these circumstances where you've got someone checking a wheelchair in, so they're obviously in a position where travelling's not that easy for them. The description of what happened with the Jetstar staff member allegedly turning their back on the father and saying that they were too late and that there was no other options for them that were practical. I mean, that just feels like appalling customer service, and as I said at the start, it's a shocker.
Really appreciate your time, John. That's John Duffy from Consumer New Zealand. Interested in your airline encounters on that sort of stuff? Do text us 2101. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Does budget airline mean budget service? Let us know what you think. 27 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. And ko taku hoa e naine ko Nona Peltier. Nona Peltier joins us live in the studio to talk business. Oh, that's a headline, isn't it, Nona?
It's exciting.
Yeah, house prices. Not so exciting for people who own houses. Maybe if you're trying to purchase, tell us what the numbers are today.
Well, I guess it just depends. I mean, at the moment, the Real Estate Institute's house price index, it fell 5.8% in the year ending August, and that's versus a 2.9% drop in July. So we're seeing a downward trend there. What does it actually mean? Well, in real terms, the median house price was $800,000 a year ago, and $850,000, and today it's $800,000. So that's a drop of $50,000 in 1 year, and $10,000 from last month. So yeah, those are big numbers, and for homeowners that might be a little bit concerned. If you're not selling, it doesn't really matter. But if you are, and that's what we are seeing, is people trying to sell, but not selling at any price. So sales are down 18%, and that's partly because people are hanging on and not anxious to sell at a lower price. They're not meeting the market, in other words. So if you think, well, you might be waiting to sell your house, so you turn around the market, don't necessarily think that's going to happen. According to some economists, they're expecting interest rates to rise to, say, 5.9%. That's the fixed rate 1 year terms, and then probably by the middle of next year, the prices will start to plateau, like they'll start to, maybe recover a little bit. But it might be 18 months, 2 years before we start to see any increase in prices. So if you have to hurry to sell your house, you might want to get on your bike. And if you're looking to buy one, you have time to shop around.
Let's talk about Mercury. It's going to build $115 million worth of wind farm in Southland. That's a lot of coin. Is it a big wind farm? Why there?
Well, it's an interesting one, because you would think with the Meridian and the hydro plant and so on, and TY, some question marks hanging over that, why would you put it there? But it turns out it's an ideal spot for wind generation. And so Mercury thought that they inherited this property basically through Tilt Renewables. It had been on the books looking for resource consent for 15 years. They just got it. They're going to be putting in these turbines, 10 of them. That's enough to power 20,000 homes and 66,000 electrical vehicles. They think it's a good risk to invest, and it's totally scalable. They're thinking that Southland will become the renewable energy hub for New Zealand. That's their expectation. Well, we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, what have you got for me from the markets, Nona?
Okay, well, we fell 0.4%. That was a 51-point drop to 11,762. And the dollar at 61.3 US cents, 89.2 Australian, and 52.4 pence.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with Business News there. The operator of Kawerau's paper mill has pulled legal action against workers and made them a new pay offer. 145 mill workers have been locked out since August 9 after the union rejected the company's proposed 3% pay offer. Our reporter Nick Trubridge joins us now with the latest. Nick, what is the offer?
Hi Lisa, this news just breaking as we came to air tonight. Essity, for its part, says it has accepted and offered what the ERA has come back to them with. Specifically this year, that will include a 5% increase as well as a $4,000 lump sum. Next year, it'll be 4.5% and a $3,000 lump sum. And in 2024, it will be 4%. Now, where does this sit in the middle of everything? Well, it's kind of somewhere in between what each side was after. Of course, Essity was saying that workers were wanting 7% up front, and the unionised workers, for their part, were saying they had only been offered 3%. I spoke to a union official earlier this evening. He said, he had his nose out of joint a little bit, to put it bluntly, that he hadn't heard from Essity itself yet, but nonetheless he will be taking this offer to union workers tomorrow, and they will deliberate and they will come back.
So, when will they likely be on the job again?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it really is a case of sooner the better, really. Of course, this mill is really the only paper mill left in New Zealand. It currently takes up 50% of the New Zealand market, I believe it is. The rest of our paper comes from overseas. We've got a statement from Essity basically saying that if this is accepted, production is set to resume on September 15, which is in just over a month's time. We've been speaking to Essity this afternoon, and we've got a statement back from them basically saying reaching an agreement, and I'm quoting here, is in everyone's best interests and allows work to return to normal at the mill. So we will see, we will keep you up to date with this, and we will be talking to union officials tomorrow to see whether they are going to accept or whether it's back to the drawing board.
Thanks, Nick. Nick Trubridge there with the update on that dispute from the Kawerau paper mill. Offer being made, waiting to see if the workers will take it and go back on the job. It is 22 minutes to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let's get to some of your feedback now on food prices. A lot of you are getting in touch. We are growing our greens, this person says. A lot of you have turned to the garden. Angela says, I have had to stop my caviar and we have taken to doing a head count after every meal in case we accidentally eat the littlies. It's good to see someone still got a sense of humour about the situation. Gordon's got in touch to say the retired two of us have an annual food bill from the supermarket of $9,000. This year it will top $10,000. It's scary, isn't it, Gordon, if you sit and do the numbers, exactly how much you eat in any given year. It's basically just a feast of your hard-earned cash. Pip from Whangaparoa says the current weather has had a huge effect on the price of vegetables. You can't just say it is inflation. That is right. Growers have been struggling against some extreme weather conditions. Melissa says we are growing our own veg this year, have planted fruit trees, berries and currants, make our own bread and mayonnaise. Wow, good on you. Fruit syrup, soups, apple cider, vinegar, etc. Could open your own store. And we work in our own very small gardening business, but the extra work is fun and satisfying, and especially it brings the costs right down. Melissa says eating vegan helps. It is so yum. Another person says no longer buying fish and chips or cafe treats. No biggie for me, but hard for food outlets. And this one also, when I noticed last week, what I noticed last week was on Sunday at New World that Australian strawberries were $6.99 a punnet. On the way home, I noticed Karori Foursquare Dairy was selling the exact same strawberries for $4.99. Next day back at the supermarket, I checked, they were $7.99. Yeah, it's interesting, the whole shop around thing. Do keep your feedback coming. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go to the headlines. Ko Sarah anō tēnei.
Thanks, Lisa. Political leaders have paid tribute to Queen Elizabeth in Parliament, acknowledging the relationship she had with Aotearoa. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern told Parliament the Queen stood beside New Zealand through some of its darkest days, while National Leader Christopher Luxon says she represented consistency and stability. The Queen's body is due to be flown to London overnight after lying at rest in the 12th century St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh. Nearly 1 million people are expected to queue to pay their last respects to the Queen, who will lie in state in Westminster for 4 days before the funeral on Monday. A Christchurch city councillor says convicted white supremacist Philip Arps's failure to get elected onto a school board is a huge relief. But councillor Sarah Templeton says schools could still face similar situations in the future. Kennedy Simon and Ruahei de Mont will co-captain a 32-strong Black Ferns squad for the upcoming Rugby World Cup in Aotearoa. The Black Ferns opening World Cup match is against Australia at Auckland's Eden Park on October the 8th. And South Korean actor Lee Jung-jae has become the first Asian star to win the Emmy Award for Best Male Actor in a Drama for his role in the hit Netflix show Squid Games. Outstanding drama went to Succession for a second year running, while Ted Lasso also won for the second year in the Best Comedy Series category. Those are the headlines. I'll have more news and weather again at 6 o'clock.
Ngā mihi, Sarah. On or off, what did you decide? It's day one of basically choosing whether or not you wear a mask after pretty much all COVID restrictions lifted at midnight. Masks are still a must in medical or aged care facilities, but it's up to other institutions and businesses to make up their own policies. Our reporter Finn Blackwell and camera operator Marika Habazi went out to see how people feel about the change.
On the streets of Auckland, riding the bus, or sitting in cafes, the number of people wearing masks today had dramatically shifted. Almost everywhere we went, it was a near 50-50 split, reflecting also how people are feeling about the change.
I think it's a lot better, to be honest. I haven't really liked having to go around wearing a mask everywhere.
Business is going to be happy, but
Yeah, I think people probably won't be wearing masks as much as they should be.
To be honest, I was already not really the person that was using the mask a lot, so it doesn't really feel like a lot has changed, so no.
Yeah, hopefully it'll feel back to normal.
Lifting mask requirements in shops and other public areas has come as a breath of fresh air to many. There are those, however, who remain sceptical.
I never take my mask off, not ever.
And why is that?
Because coronavirus has not been eliminated from New Zealand.
I think it's too soon, but I don't know if it's politically feasible to string it out. So no-win situation, I guess, catch-22.
I think it's kind of cool. I never minded wearing masks, but hopefully it'll feel back to normal soon.
This person told us they think the requirements for schools should stay a little longer.
I do having two children in the primary, and then in the class they don't having a distance to each other. Sometimes they just sitting together next to each other, and sometimes they having activity, it's really nearby to each other.
Titai Tokorau Principals Association President Patrick Newman says removing mask requirements is a huge relief.
I think I, along with just about every other principal and teacher in Te Tai Tokorau, will welcome that we can start to get back to normalcy for both our children, our whānau and our teachers and our profession.
People in the Auckland suburb of Kingsland said the requirements could have been done away with ages ago.
I support the use of them in the medical profession and in healthcare, but yeah, I think a few months ago would have been a bit better.
Obviously there's a lot of other people thinking different, and with their health, you don't want to put anyone in danger, but for myself, it could have been sooner.
Around Auckland Hospital, this man said it's the right call.
I think it's making people more fearful, so getting that past us would make things look like they're moving forward.
We also spoke to an immunocompromised person who said they feel abandoned by the health system. They say they're now having to rethink how they go about their life, with so many now not wearing masks. Masks are still required in healthcare spaces like hospitals, GPs and pharmacies. Elsewhere, it'll be up to the public to decide when they want to wear a mask.
And if you'd like to check out that story, the video version will be on our web page. It is 14 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Get a bloody hurry on. That message to the government from wrongfully convicted man Alan Hall, who must now wait for an independent review into his likely innocence before any compensation is decided. The Supreme Court quashed Mr Hall's conviction for murder during a home invasion nearly 40 years ago, declaring it a serious miscarriage of justice. He spent almost 19 years behind bars. Now the government's appointed retired High Court Judge Rodney Hanson to review whether Alan Hall, who was subsequently diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, meets the innocence test. His brother Jeff explains the family just want it sorted.
There's 4 decades, and we just want Alan just to settle down. He's 4 decades of Alan's life, and now this process through Justice Hanson is going to take another year. It's going to take 6 months for him to review the case, and it's going to take 6 months to, and if he does find Alan innocent, another 6 months to allocate an amount. And that's a long time for Alan to be put on hold. He's been put on hold enough.
The Supreme Court quashed his conviction, and it was an unequivocal ruling and analysis. Should that be enough to determine what happens next, do you think?
In my view, absolutely it should be enough. I've lived this thing for 40 years alongside Alan, and absolutely the Supreme Court had spelled it out very clearly. This either was a gross miscarriage, this was a miscarriage of justice, but it was either done purposely or it was just a huge mistake on incompetence on the part of the police. And this should be very clear to the Minister just that level of decision from the Supreme Court, and it sent a very clear message. I mean, we all heard it. I just wish that the Minister has as well.
You talk about the family's life, and Alan's in particular, being put on hold. What would he like to do with the compensation? What is his dream?
His dream? A couple of puppy dogs. He wants 2 little puppy dogs. That's his dream. But of course, he wants somewhere to put them. So he would like to have a home somewhere, a little bit of land with a home, with a bit of bush and a stream through it, where he can just plot around his days and just enjoy that. And that's what he would like for his foundation.
Do you have an idea of how much it should be, Jeff?
I know Alan does, and I sat down with Alan. In fact, someone was, we were here with a friend, and where this conversation came up, and I said to Alan, "Okay, Alan, everything you've been through, how much do you think you should get?" And I started off at $1 million, and he goes, "No, more, $2 million, more, $5 million, more, 10, more, 20," and he just turned around and said, $500 million from what I've been through. And I went, okay. Yeah, so he's, I don't know. But look, we have had a bit of a look at it through the lawyers, and there are, it's estimated around about in between 5 and 6.5, somewhere in there.
Jeff, I know Alan is with you. Would he like to say anything?
He would. He's just gone downstairs to take the rubbish out. He won't be long.
Hi, Alan. How are you? It's Lisa here from Radio New Zealand.
Oh, yes. Might have seen you on TV and you're doing stories.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you, Alan. Lovely to talk to you.
Yeah.
How do you feel about waiting for this to be decided about the compensation? How are you doing?
Well, wish to get a bloody hurry on.
Yeah?
Excuse my language, but I wish to get a bloody hurry on. You can quote me on that one.
And why do you say that, Alan?
Yeah, I say that in a good way. Oh, that's the one I haven't done with. And put it behind me. I don't know. Typical government department that's dragging it along.
How has it been for you, Alan?
Well, it's all right. No, it's all over, so everything's I've put behind me.
Do you feel good about the conviction being wiped?
Yes, oh yes. Yes, and I look forward for the police officers who did this to me to be charged and prosecuted according to the law of the land.
How do you feel about what's happened to you, Alan?
It was a kick in the stomach, at first. But I've learned to adapt to the situation.
And are you enjoying living with your brother?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
We're just planning whereabouts in Jerry Fresh we all want to live.
And that was Alan Hall there, and before that I was speaking to his brother Jeff Hall. They're having to wait for a review of Alan's innocence before the government decides on compensation. His dream, as he said, is to have a little house in a rural setting. Let's get to some of your feedback now. On Jetstar, you're not fond, judging by the feedback we're getting. This person says, Jetstar's behaviour is absolutely appalling. I'm deeply offended on behalf of this family. We have a disabled sister, and travelling with her is a major exercise in planning and coordination. Jetstar has proven itself to be utterly lacking in comprehension about the difficulties. Dr. Wong has got in touch to say, same scenario when I flew Jetstar with my family, where I checked in, but it closed for my son, so we were forced to buy new tickets with Air New Zealand, and we will never touch Jetstar again in our life. And this one, Jetstar left us stranded in Melbourne for 4 days, expected us to pay our own hotel and accommodation. I'll never fly Jetstar again. Fly Jetstar and you pay the price of cheap, they say. 2101 on text. Let us know your thoughts. Christchurch City Council has voted against a government directive to introduce new housing intensification standards. It voted not to introduce the standards, even though councillors were told beforehand if they did not pass it, a commissioner may be appointed to do it instead. The controversial national standards are already in place in Auckland and Wellington. Neva Chittick reports from Otatahi.
Inside the council chambers, the room was tense as residents sporting Vote No and Stop Daylight Robbery signs clapped, cheered and booed during the debate. Councillors were fired up, banging on benches as they made their arguments. Deputy Mayor Andrew Turner began his remarks with the most popular point of the day.
Christchurch isn't Auckland, and Christchurch does not need Auckland solutions for problems that Christchurch does not have.
That was echoed by Pauline Cotter, who said government appeared to be working off an assumption that sufficient housing isn't already being built in the city.
We know there have been almost 5,000 dwellings consented in the past year in Christchurch, and that these tiny cramped boxes with no gardens are selling for $600,000 to $700,000 plus.
Jani Johansson urged councillors to stand with their community to stand up to central government.
This city has a proud legacy of having a strong social and environmental conscience and doing what is right. From Kate Shepherd to the nuclear-free movement to the People's Republic of Christchurch, it is time to do it again. The right thing to do is not to notify this because there's widespread community concern about the impact it will have on the well-being of our local residents.
Melanie Coker summed up how difficult the decision was for councillors.
Do we bow down and let the government walk all over us, or do we stand up for what we believe in? I want to vote no, not to notify, to give the proverbial finger to the government and let them take full responsibility. I also want to vote yes to notify, to try our best to protect our character and heritage areas and protect the trees in our suburbs. In 30 years' time, I don't want to see no trees in our suburbs.
5 councillors voted in favour of the national framework. Outgoing Mayor Leanne Dalzell was one of them and rounded out the vote with a warning.
I have to support us holding on to the process because it will be worse if the council does not.
It is now up to the government to decide how it will respond.
And that report was from Neva Chittick. MPs returned to Parliament today to mark the accession of the new King and pay tributes to Queen Elizabeth II. There were personal anecdotes, reflections on royal tours of Aotearoa and recognition of the harmful impacts of colonisation. Our political reporter Annika Smith has more.
Mr. Speaker, it is my sad duty to formally advise the House of Representatives that on 8 September 2022, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II died at Balmoral Castle.
The debating chamber, at times raucous during question time, was a sea of black clothing today, its mood quiet and sombre. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern marking the historical day, offering up her condolences.
For the vast majority of New Zealanders, we have known no other king or queen. To paraphrase the Prince of Wales, we knew this day would come, but it will be some time before the reality of life without the Queen will truly feel real.
The Queen's reign spanned more than a dozen New Zealand Prime Ministers, Jacinda Ardern the 16th. She visited Aotearoa 10 times, leaving many New Zealanders with personal stories about their brush with royalty. Here's Nationals leader Christopher Luxon.
I, like many Kiwis, did not know her personally, but one of my very first memories is standing on Memorial Avenue with my mother and my brother, enthusiastically waving our little plastic flags as the Queen drove past on her way to open the Commonwealth Games in Christchurch.
And ACT leader David Seymour.
I remember growing up in Whangarei, my grandma would point out to the balcony of the Grand Hotel on Bank Street, where she had come to stand all those years ago.
Those that stood to speak in the House today reflected on the Queen's work ethic, sense of duty, attention to detail and fondness of Aotearoa. Not all reflections were positive. Green Party co-leader Marama Davidson was the first to raise the monarchy's impact on Māori.
Queen Elizabeth herself was smart and aware. I dare say she would not be surprised in the least about any peoples raising the role of the monarchy in oppressing the power of others, including here and countries around the world.
And Te Pāti Māori co-leader Raweri Waititi says Indigenous peoples are rightly outraged.
The British Empire and the power of its monarchy was built of stolen whenua, stolen resources and stolen tongue.
The Queen's death has reignited the debate over whether or not New Zealand should become a republic. The general political consensus is it's too soon for this, though the appetite for change is mixed.
Look, ACT says if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
I don't see a case for change.
I've never sensed the urgency of it.
But I do think we should become a tiriti-centric Aotearoa.
A discussion or debate for another day. Parliament has now adjourned until next Tuesday to mark the death of the Queen.
Annika Smith there. Well, you're not pulling your punches when it comes to your feedback tonight on airlines, particularly Jetstar and service and knowing your rights. This person says, I will never fly Jetstar again after our experience. Flight not boarding, no information given for 2 hours, then said waiting for a part to come from Auckland. Finally departed 6 hours late. We missed the funeral we were going to, didn't take the flight, no refund, no apology, no phone number or contact details available to follow up with the airline staff. Rude and dismissive of our distress. Thanks for letting us know your experience, Mary. Someone else says all airlines have a late runners service for those in the know, for staff and VIPs. That's interesting. Ingrid from Gisborne's got in touch to say, when I fly with my wheelchair, I always go on first and come off last. I went to Dublin and back earlier this year with my chair with Air New Zealand, not Jetstar though, says Ingrid. On the subject of masks and wearing them, or not, because it's your first day to choose. One listener says, I'm wearing a mask in the supermarket, public transport, indoor settings where I'm close to others. So is my 85-year-old mum, for me and for others. Yeah, it's kind of hard to get used to not wearing one, to be honest. You feel a bit strange, like you're half naked. Anyway, this person says, haven't had COVID. I will keep wearing a mask until I think it is sensible to stop. Would hate to catch it now. And this one, I shall continue to wear my mask. Yours sincerely, the Lone Ranger.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Kia ora, good evening, I'm Sarah Bradley. A supermarket chain says it's trying to balance increased supplier prices with the cost of living for consumers. As new figures reveal, food prices have risen at their fastest annual rate in 13 years. Stats NZ data shows food prices are 8.3% higher than the same period last year. Countdown commercial director Steve Mills has told Checkpoint it received 4 times the number of cost increase requests from suppliers last month compared to a year ago. He says the supermarket chain is working with suppliers to cut costs.
Definitely through logistics, and so we can help them reduce costs by bringing products into our DC and using our network to get products to the store versus going direct to store.
Steve Mills says at least one supplier requested a 72% increase, but wouldn't elaborate on what the product was. The brother of a man wrongfully convicted of murder says his family just wants compensation sorted. The Supreme Court quashed Alan Hall's conviction for a murder during a home invasion nearly 40 years ago, declaring it a serious miscarriage of justice. Alan Hall's brother Jeff has told Checkpoint he's waited long enough for a decision to be made.
It's going to take 6 months for him to review the case, and it's going to take 6 months to, and if he does find Alan innocent, another 6 months to allocate an amount. And that's a long time for Alan to be put on hold. He's been put on hold enough.
Jeff Hall says his brother is looking at an estimated $5 to $6.5 million in compensation. The National Party has acknowledged the long reign of the late Queen and the incredible global events that unfolded over her lifetime. Political leaders have paid tribute to Queen Elizabeth in Parliament and the relationship she had with Aotearoa. National leader Christopher Luxon told the House, while so much around her changed, the Queen represented consistency and stability.
The Queen embodied steadfastness. In an age of ephemera, celebrity and instant gratification, the Queen was a pillar of stability and tradition. That does not mean that she and the monarchy did not change during her reign. They did, but her values did not.
The House is now adjourned until next Tuesday. Thousands of people have been filing past Queen Elizabeth's coffin throughout the night to pay their respects at St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh. Her body is being flown to London overnight. A Christchurch city councillor believes people holding extreme views will continue to vie for leadership positions at schools. Convicted white supremacist Philip Arps has failed in a bid for one of the 5 parent representatives for Te Aratai College's board. Mr Arps, who was jailed for sharing footage of the Christchurch mosque attacks, received the lowest number of votes. Councillor Sarah Templeton says similar issues for schools could happen in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that this won't be the last time
that someone of a similar background tries to get on a board of trustees. And it's really heartening to see that both the Minister and the Associate Minister are looking at taking steps to sort of safeguard our schools and our children into the future.
Sarah Templeton, who has 3 children at the school, says the outcome is a huge relief. The disability advocacy group IHC is unhappy with high rates of physical restraint in residential special schools for disabled children. It says figures provided under the Official Information Act show 2 of the 3 schools restrained children hundreds of times in the past 4 years, even though they have fewer than 30 students between them. IHC says the schools have much higher rates of restraint than other types of special schools and mainstream schools. The schools have previously argued that their restraint figures are high because they have children for 24 hours a day. Ukraine says its forces have seized even more territory from Russia as they continue their counter-offensive. President Volodymyr Zelensky says troops have now retaken more than 6,000 square kilometres during September in the east and the south. Military analyst Cedric Layton says Ukraine needs to move quickly before winter sets in.
They really can't lose the momentum that they have right now. Momentum has a kind of a force of its own, especially in military operations. And if they continue to do this, they need to be able to at least get to a point where they have achieved defensible lines, usually a river or some kind of other natural barrier.
Russia has admitted losing key cities in the northeast in what is seen by some as a potential breakthrough in the war. A giant squid has washed ashore at the top of the South Island. Farewell Spit tours guide Anton Donaldson first thought it was a large woolsack embedded in the sand, but as he got closer he could see it had tentacles. He says those on the tour were excited to see the giant squid, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see a creature that lives hundreds of metres below the ocean's surface. In the past 30 years or so, around 6 or 7 giant squid have washed up on the Spit, the last in 2019. In sport, New Zealand's most successful Olympian, Dame Lisa Carrington, was awarded her title today at Government House for services to canoe racing. Those awarded today are some of the last recipients of the Queen's Birthday honours. Administrator of the government, the Honourable Dame Susan Glazebrook, presented the honours while the Governor-General travels to London for the Queen's funeral. Dame Lisa says she's humbled to receive recognition for her achievements.
Not something I ever thought would happen, but I mean, it's so special to be here today and kind of do the full ceremony, and it's really nice to kind of just look back on why I'm here.
More honours ceremonies will take place over the next 2 weeks. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, military historian Damien Fenton looks to the past for clues about the present and strategic conflicts over Solomon Islands and Ukraine. We have part 2 of an investigation into green energy and its limits. This evening, wind, solar and hydropower. And psychologist Brett Waggoner talks about his PhD investigation into how we want to be remembered after we're dead. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And we are funded through New Zealand On Air. Te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. We're back with Lisa Owen and Checkpoint next after the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waikato, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. A few showers, some may be heavy today with a possible thunderstorm about Waikato, clearing north of Auckland tomorrow evening. Waitomo to Wellington, including Taihape. Showers clearing for most tomorrow but lingering about Taihape with snow above 900 metres. Gisborne to Wairarapa mainly fine. A few showers south of Wairoa, becoming frequent tomorrow morning and spreading north in the afternoon. For Bulla, Nelson and Marlborough, showers, some heavy with thunderstorms in Bulla, easing tomorrow morning. Snow above 400 metres. Westland, Fiordland and Canterbury to Southland, showers, some heavy with possible thunderstorms and hail today, and snow above 400 metres in the north and 200 metres in the south. Showers clearing most places overnight, but lingering about the south and east coasts. And for the Chatham Islands, a few showers turning to rain for a time tomorrow morning. You're listening to RNZ National. It's coming up to 8 minutes past 6. I'll have the news headlines at 6:30.
Nā mihi Sarah, no mai, hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Thousands of people have queued for hours in Edinburgh for a chance to walk by the Queen's coffin as it lay at rest in St Giles Cathedral. Overnight, huge crowds poured into the street to watch the Queen's procession make its way up the Royal Mile, with her children walking slowly behind the hearse. Now attention turns to London, a city gearing up for a major few days. Morning Report presenter Corin Dan is in London and he joins us now. Kia ora, Corin, what's happening there now?
Kia ora, Lisa. Well, we are technically at the start of the queue for the lying in state, which is still not going to open, or the queue won't, they won't actually open Westminster Hall until Thursday your time, I think, Thursday morning. So there's a long wait for about 5 people behind me. There's quite a big queue of media wanting to talk to them. It's a bit unclear exactly where the line starts, but they are the first people in the queue. It's going to snake all the way around the Thames up towards Westminster Hall. It will be kilometres long. They are expecting 750,000 people to want to do it, but the reports are that, in fact, it may be limited to about 350,000. And the queue time, well, it is going to be between 17 and 35 hours long.
Wow, that is remarkable. I tell you what, while I've been sitting waiting to talk to you, I've been watching the live shot for those people who are listening rather than watching, and it's really interesting. Joggers have gone by you, people with their backpacks on, heading home from work. It's a city of extreme contrast at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. There's also a absolute mass of security guards and police, which you can't quite see from where I am as well, getting ready. Over the river from where I am at the moment is there's a massive security operation, because all of the mourners will have to go through very tight security in order to pay their respects, airport style security. So that's going to slow everything up as well. If you want to come down and be an anti-monarchist, I don't think you're going to have much luck either, because there's been reports that people are being pushed away or moved from making their protests. That's another whole matter and another whole story, which I think we'll look into around free speech. But nevertheless, this is going to be quite something. And if the scenes we've seen in Edinburgh are anything to go by, the numbers that we're hearing about are going to be right.
What actually happens with the Queen's coffin now, Corin?
Yeah, so at the moment, so it is going to make its way from Edinburgh over for the rest of the day it is still lying in rest in Edinburgh at St Giles, but it's going to make its way to London tonight via an RAF plane. Princess Anne will be accompanying the Queen. It'll arrive in London and then be driven to Buckingham Palace. That will be around 6 o'clock in the morning New Zealand time, 7 o'clock in the morning New Zealand time. During Morning Report we'll cover that. At that point the Queen will spend one last night at Buckingham Palace. Then the next morning there is this procession down the mile, which will be a big event, a big televised event. I think it lasts about 45 minutes. The drive down to Westminster Hall, where the lying in state will begin. So there's still an enormous amount of this process to go. It is just incredible, the procedures and the tradition and everything that has been laid out for this week. It is mind-boggling, frankly, trying to get your head around some of it.
Corin, you spoke earlier with a really enthusiastic royal supporter. He'd set up camp, right? I think he was on the Mall, not 100% of his location, but he had quite a few provisions there and looked to be sort of, hunkering down for the long haul. What do we know about whether people are actually going to be allowed to camp out there until the Queen arrives?
It's a good point. They're not. He claimed that he is such a well-known superfan that the authorities had kind of let him stay there. And I have to be honest, I was a little bit sceptical. And then sure enough, he is. A couple of Googles and there he is all over various media from years gone by. Many of these events, he's been doing that for years, going to these sorts of events, Jubilees and the Queen Mother's funeral, and doing exactly the same thing, and seems to have got a bit of a reputation. But the general advice is absolutely no camping. And the queue when this starts will be a moving queue too, so you won't be able to sit there in your deck chair and have a nice cup of tea. I think it's going to be harder than that. But that's all part of it. The people who want a queue, they want to make that sacrifice. That's part of it. They want to acknowledge the Queen's duty and service by making that sacrifice of that queue.
Really good to talk to you, Corin. Thanks for that. That's Corin Dan joining us live from London there. And as he says, he was right at the start of that queue that is forming for people who wish to walk past the Queen's coffin when she is indeed lying in state in London. The flag at Government House in Wellington remains at half-mast, but today was a day for celebrating those who have achieved the highest honours in New Zealand. About a dozen people were awarded their honours today, among the final few to get them in the Queen's name. Our reporter Kirsty Frame and cameraman Angus Drever were there.
She's the country's most decorated Olympian and last year was named the most influential Māori sports personality in the last 30 years.
Dame Lisa Carrington, please come forward.
Dame Lisa Carrington says it was humbling to be officially awarded the honour.
Not something I ever thought would happen, but I mean, it's so special to be here today and kind of do the full ceremony, and it's really nice to kind of just look back on why I'm here.
Wahine toa are not knighted, but instead are ceremoniously cloaked in a korowai. Dame Lisa Carrington says she felt the honour of wearing a piece worn by other dames before her.
I feel really proud to be able to have worn something that they've worn and I guess add to it as it goes forward.
Those awarded today are some of the last recipients of the Queen's Honours Awards. Her portrait hung in the ballroom today for the ceremony, but for the first time, God Save the King played on the piano for King Charles III. Governor-General Dame Cindy Kido has travelled to the UK for the Queen's funeral. So in her place was Administrator of the Government, the Honourable Dame Susan Glazebrook.
It's been a privilege to hear your stories. You have each used your talents and abilities to improve the lives of your fellow New Zealanders.
Among those being awarded for their outstanding services today were Professor Alec Ekeroma, receiving an Order of Merit for his contributions to health in the Pacific community. Prominent film producer Chelsea Winstanley has championed the successful Te Reo Māori versions of Disney films. Today she received her Order of Merit.
I'm thankful that other people have recognised the contribution that I've made, but it's not just me. There are so many other people that help me do what I do, and I'm very grateful for that.
Ms Winstanley says her work for Te Reo Māori in film is wonderful for young children.
One of our biggest dreams for Matua Media, who makes those productions, was really just for moi moi and ngā mokopuna pōpō, for our babies of tomorrow to see their own language in public spaces, in cinema, and be proud to walk into those spaces, hear their reo everywhere, and know that it's just so normal.
Dame Carolyn Henwood was also awarded the honour at a later ceremony this afternoon. More Queen's Honours ceremonies will take place over the next 2 weeks, recognising the likes of Sir Tepani O'Regan, Dame Sylvia Cartwright and Taika Waititi.
And that story from Kirsty and Angus will be on our website, the video version. Do check it out. As King Charles ascends to the throne, his wife Camilla becomes Queen Consort. For the daughter of an army major, it's a role that was virtually unthinkable just a few decades ago. The BBC's Daniela Ralph explains how public attitudes towards Camilla have changed.
Her early duties as Queen Consort, just a step behind her husband at a palace reception over the weekend.
We'll do our best.
But always there, a constant support, as she has been for so much of his life. A walkabout in this new royal role. Once a vilified figure, now being greeted warmly by the crowds as Queen Consort. The rehabilitation of Camilla has been complex.
It was not easy at the beginning, but she conducted herself with such extraordinary grace and dignity. And she has now found a very important place in the hearts of the British people. These are heavy burdens both bear, and they need each other. And all great monarchs have had a great consort.
Together in their 20s until the relationship faltered. She was a significant figure in the King's life long before their marriage. She faced criticism after the royal divorce, then the sudden death of Diana, Princess of Wales. It all forced Camilla to step back. But there was a gradual, carefully managed re-emergence into the spotlight. It marked the start of a slow shift in public opinion. Culminating in their wedding in 2005, Supported by the royal family, she was now one of them.
It has been a turbulent journey through public life for the Queen consort. But Camilla's new role will be vital. She has obviously brought stability and personal happiness to the King, and she will now be crucial to the success of his reign.
It wasn't always easy for her, but you know they've managed to stay together, and they seem to be very happy, and the nation seemed to warm to her, which is great because I think she's wonderful.
She knows him inside out, and I think she'll support him in whatever he does for the country.
Well, I think he needs all the support he can get, really, doesn't he?
Speaking out on the causes she's been passionate about won't stop now.
1 in 4 women in this country will suffer domestic violence in their lifetime. 1 in 4.
Supporting victims of domestic violence will continue to be a priority.
Your Royal Highnesses.
She also brings a lightness of touch to official duties, including this surprise appearance on EastEnders for the Jubilee.
Say a drop a day keeps the doctor away.
At the age of 75, she is now stepping up when many of her friends are retired and stepping back. But they believe she will thrive in her new role.
She's down to earth and normal like the rest of the nation, but she has massive responsibilities. And so I think we're very lucky.
As the King takes on the job he has waited for so long, he does so with the woman he always refers to as his beloved wife by his side.
It is 19 after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Ukraine is claiming it's recaptured nearly 6,000 square metres of territory from Russia since launching a counter-offensive earlier this month. Pressure is growing on Vladimir Putin, but Russia insists it will continue its war until all of its goals are met. The BBC's James Waterhouse has more.
War can be both symbolic as well as significant. And today was just that. Russian ambitions once again abandoned. Moscow calls this a regrouping. It's more like a retreat, and a quick one. Kiev is claiming to have taken back almost all of the Kharkiv region. Even Russian officials admit to being outnumbered by 8-1 here.
Ізюм був, є і буде Україна.
Izium was, is, and always will be Ukraine, says this soldier. This is territory which Russia fought hard to take, lost in the space of days.
We met them with tears in our eyes. We could not imagine that they would come so unexpectedly, but we've been waiting for them almost half a year, and we are so happy.
Whenever Russia is frustrated, it responds. This time accused of striking civilian targets, causing trains to stop working on Kharkiv's metro. For some, much more was lost than just power. Ukraine is pushing on more than one front. That has risks, but it's enough to worry one of Putin's biggest allies, Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov. If changes are not made, he said in an online post, I will be forced to go to the country's leadership. This is the most significant Russian withdrawal since they pulled out from Kiev in late March. The human cost for both countries remains huge, and on whether it's a price worth paying, the majority of Ukrainians feel there is no choice. This is about survival, and the idea of making any concessions to Russia remains unfathomable. The Kremlin anticipated taking Ukraine in a matter of days. 201 of them later, it's going backwards.
And that was James Waterhouse. 60 million people have been locked down across China since the beginning of August as part of the country's zero COVID strategy. For some time, there's been rumbling discontent over the policy. Now there are concerns about serious food shortages in more than 30 towns and cities. The BBC's Stephen McDonnell reports.
Residents in locked-down Chengdu have been calling out from their windows. During the Mid-Autumn Festival, 16 million people have been confined to their homes in the southwestern city, and this was a way of cheering each other up. Further to the south, the same thing happened in Guiyang, another city, another COVID lockdown. This time, 4.5 million people who are not allowed to leave their housing estates. In Guiyang, there's been the additional hardship of food shortages. This has been even worse in far western China's Xinjiang region, where the deputy mayor of Yining City made a public apology. Xiao Shuigang acknowledged shortages of food and other essential supplies. He also said some residents were finding it hard to get access to medical treatment. In recent months, rather than easing COVID restrictions, Chinese officials have been applying them ever more strictly. In October, the twice-a-decade Communist Party Congress will usher in a historic third term in power for Xi Jinping. So at the moment, there's no greater priority for the government than social stability. In an attempt to reduce tensions, rather than speaking about lockdowns, officials are now referring to static management and censoring online posts which are critical of zero COVID. However, strict measures to return each coronavirus outbreak to zero cases have been smashing the economy here, which is bringing great pressure on the party at a time of increased political tension.
To the US now, and Donald Trump's legal battle with America's Justice Department continues. The government has put forward 2 retired judges to examine the documents seized by the FBI from Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. But the former president wants his own preferred candidate to be the so-called special master. Meanwhile, the whole process is slowing down the DOJ investigation. CNN's Jessica Snyder reports.
Federal Judge Eileen Cannon facing a critical decision on how the special master process should proceed as the disagreements between Trump's legal team and the Justice Department escalate in court filings. Lawyers for the former president saying the DOJ's criminal inquiry into the potential mishandling of classified documents is simply a document storage dispute that has spiraled out of control, and questioning whether there was an urgent need for the FBI to search Mar-a-Lago.
To have this search warrant based on failed NARA negotiations, I suppose, that allowed the government to basically ransack the president's residence.
Trump's legal team now asking Judge Cannon to deny DOJ's request that investigators be able to continue reviewing the classified documents they seized, but also seeming to sidestep the former president's common refrain that he declassified all documents, only saying that Trump had the authority to declassify anything he wanted, and arguing the documents found at Mar-a-Lago were secure in a locked room, writing, "There is no indication any purported classified records were disclosed to anyone." But on one of their main disagreements, even Trump ally Chris Christie thinks Trump's team has a losing argument.
Their main thrust is that some of these may be covered by executive privilege. Well, there's only one executive who can assert the privilege, and that's the one who is the current executive, Joe Biden.
A federal judge is asking Trump and DOJ to come to some agreement on the special master review, to little avail, each side putting up their own preferred candidates for the job and suggesting different timelines. DOJ wanting the review finished by mid-October as opposed to the 90-day deadline set forth on Trump's side. Trump was back in the D.C. area Monday at his golf club in Northern Virginia. Meanwhile, Trump's challenger in 2016, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, saying she believes Trump should be treated like any other American in a criminal investigation.
If the evidence proves or seems to show that there are charges that should be leveled, then I think the rule of law should apply to anyone.
And that was CNN's Jessica Snyder reporting. A high school cafeteria worker in the US is being praised for her swift action after she saved a choking student's life. The teenage girl approached her at lunch, her face becoming more and more red as she struggled to breathe. CNN's Mike Holden has the story.
How's your day going?
North Royalton area mom of 2, Megan Kulikowski.
We're good. Have a great day.
Takes serious pride in her job as a cafeteria worker. Whether it's prepping Padua Franciscan High School's famous chocolate chip cookies in the back kitchen.
You're all set. Thank you.
Or waiting on lines of students in the morning and afternoon lunch periods.
You really do grow a bond with them, and you know them personally, and you just want to make sure that they're all okay and all taken care of.
And taken care of has been given a whole new meaning. Back on September 1st, Kulikowski was stopped in her tracks in the middle of the cafeteria.
I was at the register ringing, and I had students coming up, and a girl came to the side, and kind of surprised to see her there.
She tells News 5 something was seriously off as she watched the teenage girl's face become more and more flushed while she gasped for breath.
I could hear her mumble help, but you could tell that it was struggled and just kind of caught me by surprise. I yelled for help. I threw my arms around her.
Some students watched from nearby tables as Kulikowski ditched the checkout line and performed the Heimlich maneuver.
Honestly, I didn't even have time to think of what it could have been. I just knew we had to help her and get whatever it was out. And I was totally caught by surprise when I looked at the ground, and it was a bottle cap from a water bottle.
Kulikowski successfully dislodged the bottle cap from the girl's airway, which she apparently had been chewing on.
She said thank you. She said, she was okay. She wanted, again, none of the attention. She just wanted to go back to class.
The family of the child says they feel blessed and eternally grateful to the cafeteria staff for looking out for her. Kulikowski says she's a bit caught off guard by the newfound recognition and praise, but at the end of the day, she says it's what any of her fellow cafeteria moms would do.
I'm taking it all in. I am greatly appreciative, but again, I don't feel like I did anything else that any of these other women wouldn't have done. We all care about these kids so much.
Wow, that's so lucky. Before we take off for the night, some of your feedback again on Jetstar. This person says last holidays took grandsons aged 10 and 14 to the airport to fly to Queenstown to meet up with their mother. Tickets with Jetstar were booked online. Boys checked in, got on the plane. They were seated, but they were taken off before they took off. They were asked their ages and were told that the 14-year-old needed to be 15 to be responsible for his brother. So they were removed from the aircraft. Another person says her teenage daughter was left stranded after she couldn't provide photo ID, so they had to go to the airport and rescue her. Now, don't forget, you can catch up on Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcast from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō, and tomorrow from 5 a.m, first up we'll have the latest on the Kawerau paper mill dispute, plus fish and chips with Auckland mayoral candidate Viv Beck. Chippies, yum. Tune in for that one, 5 a.m.
RNZ headlines at 6:30. Supermarket chain Countdown says it's working with suppliers to keep costs down for customers. New figures show food prices have risen at their fastest annual rate in 13 years. The brother of a man wrongfully convicted of murder says his family just wants compensation sorted. Christchurch Residents Association say they're thrilled the City Council has voted against new housing intensification standards. And Succession has won the award for Best Drama Series at the Emmys for a second time. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Thanks, Sarah. And I'm Brian Crump, getting ready for another night on RNZ National. Later in this hour, you'll have a special edition of The House because they've got a very short working week on account of the death